Ladies and gentlemen, it's now 6 o'clock, and I'd like to welcome you to the Blount County Beer Board. At this time, if you will call roll, Mr. Clerk.
Okay. Archer. Here. Carver. Here. Caskey. Carter. Here. Daly. Here. Farmer. Here. French.
Here.
Melton. Here. Samples.
Here.
Okay. You've got 8 present and 1 absent. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. At this time, I will read the emergency evacuation procedure. In the event of an emergency evacuation, an alarm may sound. Everyone should exit the building by way of the nearest stairwell in a safe and effective manner. If the nearest stairwell is blocked by smoke, use the other stairwell. Do not use the elevator. Once you have reached the main floor, follow the exit signs to exit the building and quickly proceed away from the building. Please be mindful of others evacuating and of emergency vehicles. This time I will stand for a motion to set the agenda. So moved by Mr. Carter. Seconded by Mr. Farmer. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Now I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the June 9th, 2015 Beer Board meeting. So moved by Ms. Daly. Seconded by Mr. Carver. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, motion carries. This time we'll move to item C, public input on items on the agenda. Anyone wish to speak to items on the agenda? Seeing no hands, we'll move to item D, which is unfinished business, and there being none, we'll move to new business. And at this time, we have a public hearing set for an off-premises beer permit application by Foothills Market at 2904 Montvale Road, Maryville, Tennessee. And at this time, I will turn the public hearing over to our attorney, Mr. Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would the representative, Mr. Everett, come forward to the podium, please? You are Jeffrey Everett, is that correct, the applicant? Yes. Mr. Everett, just raise your hand and take oath, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the answers and information you provide to the board tonight will be true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief? You are Jeffrey Everett, the applicant for this off-premises permit. Is that correct? And the area of this business is at the address 2912 Montvale Road, and it's the Foothills Market building. That's correct?
That is correct.
And you're the owner of that, and as well as the applicant here.
That is correct.
You have provided an application, and your application was submitted to the Sheriff's Department for GPS measurements to the nearest church and school. And apparently the nearest church is 1,223 feet, 0.4 feet, and that's Foothills Forest, and nearest school is Montvale Elementary, and it's 3,912 feet. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Is all the information set forth in your application, including the information and the statistics, true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, sir. It is true.
We noticed on this permit application that you had listed 6 homeowners within 300 feet, and I don't see any. Are any homeowners here to make objection to that? Okay, I take it you may have had some conversation with those homeowners before you made the application. Do you understand if any of those had appeared and objected, the board couldn't approve, but in the absence of their objection, then the permit can be granted even though you're within 300 feet. Very well, sir. Does any member of the board have any questions for Mr. Everett? All right, hearing none, sir. Anybody from the audience have any questions for Mr. Everett? Very well. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a seat. And Mr. Chairman, we'll close the public hearing, and I would suggest to the board that all the requirements for the issuance of this permit have been met.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. At this time, What is the pleasure of the board? Motion to approve the permit by Mr. Farmer, seconded by Mr. Carver. We don't vote for roll call vote. We'll take a roll call vote.
Archer? Carver? Yes. Caskey? Carter? Yes. Daly? Farmer? Yes. French?
Yes.
Melton? Yes. Samples? Yes. Okay, you have 8 yeses and 1 absent.
At this time, Mr. Everett, your beer permit has been approved, and if you'll, I think, wait till after the meeting, we'll sign the license. And
Mr. Everett, if you will come by the office in the morning, and you need to bring your taxable certificate, and there's a charge that goes on for your annual beer fee, so that has to be paid as well. So we'll give you the permit in the morning, if that's okay.
All right, we'll move on to item 2 under new business. And that, I know, if you have looked in your packet, there is a letter from the State of Tennessee Alcoholic Beverage Commission regarding the McGee-Tyson Ruby Tuesday establishment on Airport Highway. And if you read your notice, they were served for serving alcohol to an underaged minor, and however, they did take punitive action. They suspended the license, I think, for 10 days, and issued a fine. And at this time,
I have a question.
I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead, Steve. Mr. Samples.
I'd like to ask the clerk a question. Did we issue this license?
Yes, we did. This is the Ruby Tuesdays at the airport.
Inside the airport, so the city of Alcoa does not have jurisdiction?
No, that's county property. That's inside, that's in county, it's not in Alcoa.
Okay. I just didn't
But
recall.
we issued their permit.
That's correct.
We did, and we, certainly.
Okay.
We issued a liquor by the drink?
Pardon?
We issued a liquor
No,
by
no,
the
no,
drink?
no, no.
That's what it says. It's-
Yeah, that's right.
No,
That's the alcoholic
Mr.
beverage.
Farmer, they have both. They have a liquor by the drink from the state, and then, of course, we have issued a beer permit for them to sell the beer. We have the jurisdiction to issue the beer license. The state issues the liquor license, and the state, apparently, from what I've gathered from these pleadings, the state did a undercover sting where they sent someone that was 18 years of age in that had an ID, and they checked the ID, but apparently served them anyway. And so the state, under their authority, suspended their liquor license for 10 days and gave them a $1,500 civil penalty. And we can, if we so choose, if it's the pleasure of this board, we can cite them before this board for underage sales, and even though it wasn't, even though that they've already punished them, and we could punish them again, that's up to the board. I don't necessarily think that's a good idea. I do know in this particular case, I think that what Ruby Tuesdays did, they actually shut the restaurant down for 10 days there in the airport. They didn't have to shut it down. All they had to do is not sell any wine or liquor for 10 days, but I think that's probably such an important part of their sales. They just shut it down for 10 days, which is a pretty significant penalty. But if the board chooses, based on that violation, we could cite them in before this board to address whether or not we would suspend or their beer permit. And I think that's why under the law that the ABC notifies us when they have a situation like that. That's why it's in our packet for notification. We certainly don't have to take action. If the board chooses to, the board, could take some action.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. What's the pleasure of the board? Ms. Daly?
Okay, this is the first time this has happened since I've been on this board, and I don't understand why it says second violation, but No, it says first violation, but there's 3 different dates. But all of these have to do with liquor by the drink, right?
Correct.
So none of these have anything to do with beer.
Well, these are actions that were taken by the ABC based upon the fact that this restaurant, Ruby Tuesdays, holds a liquor license. And it looked to me like a couple of the violations were for a late renewal. And then they had one other sale to a minor, but it was all involving the ABC and their liquor license. But under the law, if an establishment sells to a minor, whether they actually sell beer or liquor, either or both boards can cite them in because it violates state law and it violates our ordinance. Our ordinance specifically says when we issue you a beer permit, you won't sell any type of alcohol to a minor. And of course, the ABC state law says the same thing. And so, we could bring them in and punish them again if the board so chooses, or we can, consider this for information only and not take action. That's just up to the board as to how you want to handle that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm reading here that it's an informant. Does that lead me to believe that this was like the kid was working for the state?
Correct. They do that. The ABC does that, I don't want to say routinely, but they do that some. They take an 18-year-old he's 18 but under 21, but looks like he's over 21, and they'll go in and see. And apparently, according to the information provided, they checked the ID, but I don't know if they didn't look at it carefully or what they did. But it was an underform, and they do that. They have somebody's working for them, and they have an agent standing by close, and they go in, and if they sell to them, they come in right on the spot and issue a citation to them.
So the ID showed that he was 18. In other words, it wasn't a fake ID.
I don't know. I can't tell by looking at the paperwork we have if it was a fake ID or if it was his legitimate ID that just showed he was not 21. That's usually what it is. They just give them their regular license, and the bartender doesn't look at it carefully enough. That's what traditionally I have seen in those situations. Okay. That's probably what happened.
If, in fact, it was a fake ID, is the restaurant or bar still liable? I mean, who's to say that they're to be able to determine if it's fake or not?
That's correct, and that's something that usually will provide a defense to them unless the ID on its face would raise a question of whether you were reasonable in accepting it or not.
Okay. Thank you.
Do I have any other questions for Mr. Garrett concerning this particular issue? If not, I will take it by the board's silence as far as what kind of action you want to take. That we'll use what the state, we take what the state did, use it, and let that be the punishment for them this time. And if it happens again, then we can consider it again. So we'll treat this as a FYI for your information, and we'll move on to item 3 and 4. Item 3 and 4 are basically the same issue. We need to set a public hearing for failure to make payment of the annual privilege tax by Bays Mountain and also by the Corner Smoke Shop. At this time, I will entertain a motion to set the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I think what we have to do is set a public hearing and give a notice of revocation.
Right.
I mean, that they have, if you don't pay that, then we can revoke their beer permit, and they're supposed to pay it by January 1st. If they don't pay it by January 1st, the clerk gives them notice and gives them extra time. Then if they don't pay it, it comes to this board. And so the motion should be to revoke or suspend their beer permit, and then we have to give them a notice of that and have a hearing at a future date on that revocation. If they show up and it's late, then we can decide whether to revoke or not, and you can not revoke and still invoke a civil penalty. But in discussing it with you, I think these two businesses are out of business. They probably won't show up, but the proper motion would be for us to revoke, make a motion to revoke and set it for a hearing and give them notice of that hearing. And then I'll issue a formal notice to them of the hearing along with the clerk to come and have that hearing.
I move we revoke the license for both establishments and set the public hearing for August, whatever our beer meeting is in August.
Ms. Rhonda, August the 11th, which will be at
Agenda committee night?
Agenda Committee night.
Is that enough time?
That's fine.
I'll second.
What is,
All right.
what is today?
16th.
16th.
Less than 30 days.
Let's set it for the night of the commission.
Let me take a look right here. I'll tell you, well, if you set it for the night of the commission, I know that'll give us enough time. Let me look at the statute.
What's the commission meeting in August? August 20? I'll change my motion to August 20 then.
Okay, we've got a motion to revoke both beer permits and to set the public hearing for those on at 6 p.m. August the 20th, which is our commission meeting night. And second by Mr. Farmer. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, motion carries. At this time, there are no announcements and statements, and we'll move to item G, public input on items not on the agenda. And seeing no hands, I declare the beer board closed, adjourned.